The morning began like any other, but the moment those heavy wooden doors opened, I knew this case would be different. You could always tell when someone entered my courtroom, thinking the rules didn't apply to them. That day, it was a teenager, 17, maybe 18, walking with the sort of confidence that doesn't come from character but from the illusion of privilege. His shoes clicked sharply on the tile, his suit pressed to perfection. He didn't so much as glance in my direction as he pulled out his phone, the blue light flickering across his face. Outside, people had already gathered to stare at the gleaming sports car parked illegally right by the entrance. The engine still ticked, cooling from the short drive. It was the kind of car that cost more than what most families made in a year. The license plate, customized, arrogant, had already sparked murmurs even before the session started. Now the driver himself was here, radiating the same disregard as the machine he arrived in. As he sat down, slouching back with his phone still in hand, the courtroom murmured with quiet disapproval. People whispered to each other, shaking their heads, watching this boy scroll as though justice were a show he'd been forced to attend. He didn't understand that this wasn't about money, or fines, or vehicles. It was about respect, something he clearly hadn't been taught to give. I leaned forward slightly, folding my hands. My tone was gentle, almost fatherly. Do you understand why you're here today, young man? Without lifting his eyes, he chuckled. Around. I didn't even pay for this car. My dad takes care of everything. That single sentence shifted the air in the room. You could feel it. The sharp intake of breath, the faint hiss of disbelief. A woman in the back leaned toward her neighbor, muttering something under her breath. Two men in work jackets exchanged knowing looks. They were the kind of people who'd probably spent years paying off modest cars, who knew the weight of every dollar. And now, they were watching a teenager dismiss responsibility as casually as a child flicking lint from a sleeve. I adjusted my glasses, my voice steady. This is not a stage for entertainment, young man. This is about responsibility. He finally looked up then, his grin widening. A responsibility? I've had dozens of tickets already. So what? We just pay them. The words hit the room like a slap. A few people gasped. An older woman near the front pressed her hand against her chest as if the arrogance itself had struck her. The boy leaned back in his chair, phone still in hand, proud of the reaction he'd provoked. Then he did something that silenced even the whispers. He lifted his phone, turned it around, and showed the screen to the people nearby. On it was a picture of a party, flashing lights, drinks raised high, and right in the center, there he was, grinning and holding two fingers up in mock victory. The caption read, "Beat the cops again." I didn't flinch, but my voice hardened. Do you realize your parents are paying for your recklessness, not only in dollars, but in reputation? He shrugged, smirking. They don't care. That was the moment the temperature of the room dropped. You could feel the disapproval thick in the air. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery, the low hum of moral outrage, the kind of collective reaction that happens when everyone suddenly realizes they're witnessing not just immaturity, but the making of a tragedy. I leaned forward. This court deals with more than parking tickets. It deals with people's lives, and right now. Yours is sliding toward a wall you don't even see. But he didn't listen. Instead, his grin grew wider, feeding off the tension like it was fuel. To him, this was still a game. The tension was his oxygen. Every frown from the crowd only inflated his ego further. I watched him carefully. Years of experience had taught me that arrogance in the young often hides something deeper, fear, emptiness, or neglect. But sometimes it was simpler than that. Sometimes it was just the consequence of too many people saying yes when they should have said no. I let the silence stretch. The room was perfectly still except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Slowly, the smile began to fade from his face. He shifted in his chair, not out of guilt, not yet, but because for the first time, he wasn't sure what came next. Tell me, I said quietly, do you think the law bends for you because your father pays your bills? He looked at me, feigning amusement, but there was a flicker. Just a flicker of hesitation. I think money makes problems disappear. That answer didn't surprise me. It saddened me, because I'd heard it before, from adults who should have known better, from families who believed wealth could purchase virtue. But from him, it carried a dangerous certainty. He'd never been told otherwise. Money, I said, can buy comfort. It can even buy time, but it cannot buy integrity. And if you keep living like it can, someday you'll find yourself paying for something your father can't fix. The courtroom stayed silent. Even the air seemed to hold still. He blinked once, almost as if the words had registered, but then his smirk returned. He leaned back, crossing his arms as if to say he'd heard enough. But I wasn't done. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was patient, because I knew that sooner or later the truth has a way of finding the cracks in arrogance. I turned slightly toward the clerk. We'll begin by reviewing his violations, I said, my tone calm but deliberate. But let's see what the record says about this young man who believes the law is just another game. The clerk nodded and reached for the file. The boy smirked again, but I could see the faintest tremor in his jaw, the first hint of discomfort. He didn't know it yet, but his performance was about to end. And as I sat there behind the bench, I could feel the shift in the room, that subtle turning of collective judgment from annoyance to moral reckoning. This wouldn't just be another citation hearing. This would be a mirror held up to privilege itself. And that was only the beginning. The courtroom always has a certain rhythm, an invisible current that flows between truth and deception, humility and pride. That morning, I could feel that current sharpening with every word that came from the young man's mouth. After his initial display of arrogance, I decided to slow the proceedings down. I wanted to see beyond the surface, to understand the roots of his attitude. I asked him simple questions at first. What do you do with your time? Do you study? Work? Volunteer anywhere? He looked at me like I just asked something ridiculous. Work? He repeated, chuckling. No, Your Honor. I don't need to work. My father owns half the business downtown. I'm not. Poor. The way he said that last word, poor, echoed across the courtroom. It wasn't just the arrogance of youth. It was the detachment of someone who had never understood what struggle felt like. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. I saw one man, clearly a construction worker, glance at his calloused hands and shake his head slowly. Another woman muttered something under her breath. I took a breath, keeping my tone measured. Son, you might not realize it, but the value of work isn't about money. It's about discipline. It's about learning what it means to earn something instead of taking it for granted. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. My family doesn't need lectures on money, Judge. We've been fine without all that. There it was, the wall of privilege that shields accountability. Every sentence he spoke seemed to come from a place where consequences didn't exist. But I had spent years on this bench, and I knew how fragile that wall really was. I decided to call his mother forward. Sometimes a parent's words reveal more than the child's arrogance ever could. She stood up gracefully. Expensive jewelry, immaculate hair, and the same confident composure as her son. Yet when she took the stand, I noticed something behind her calm expression. A quiet fear, the kind that lingers in parents who've lost control of their children long before realizing it. Mom, I said gently, your son has mentioned that his father takes care of all his legal and financial matters. Is that true? She smiled politely. Your Honor, my husband handles most of our affairs. We just want to ensure our son isn't treated unfairly. He's a teenager. He makes mistakes. Boys will be boys. Her tone was rehearsed. Smooth, dismissive, carefully curated. I'd heard it before from parents who'd built protective worlds around their children, shielding them from every bruise life might offer. But I also knew the danger in that. Comfort. When consequences are removed, empathy withers. Well, boys will be boys, I repeated slowly. Mom, I'm not sure if you've ever stood at the scene of a car accident caused by one of those mistakes. I have. And what I saw there wasn't harmless. She hesitated, her lips parting slightly. Her son sat behind her, smirking again as if to say, See, she's got my back. I continued, Your son's record isn't one mistake. It's a pattern, repeated violations, reckless driving, and a public disregard for safety. These are not accidents. They are choices. For the first time, her smile faltered. She adjusted the strap of her handbag nervously. He's just young, she murmured. Then now is the time for him to learn, I said firmly. Because if he doesn't, life will teach him later, and life's lessons are much harsher than mine. Her son scoffed audibly, interrupting. Come on, Your Honor, you're acting like I heard someone. These are tickets. Everyone speeds. The cops just target people like us because they're jealous. The murmurs in the courtroom, Grew louder. Even his mother turned toward him with a brief flash of embarrassment. I let the moment hang. Silence can be powerful when wielded correctly. It forces reflection. I leaned back slightly, my gaze steady. Let me tell you something, young man. Every ticket represents a choice to ignore the law. And every time you ignore the law, you endanger not only yourself, but every person who shares the road with you. You may not have hurt anyone yet, but arrogance like yours doesn't drive alone. It drags others down with it. He frowned, looking away. The smirk was gone for a moment, but not out of remorse. More like discomfort from being challenged publicly. His world was one of control, of always having the last word. But in my courtroom, truth held the privilege. His mother spoke up again, her voice softer this time. A judge, please. He's just been under a lot of pressure. His father's expectations, school, social life. I nodded slowly. Pressure can shape us, man. It can forge character or it can breed resentment. But it doesn't excuse disrespect to the law or to others. Her eyes are lowered. Her eyes lowered. There was something unspoken in her silence. Maybe guilt, maybe exhaustion. The gallery remained quiet now, watching the cracks in their polished family image widen. The boy crossed his arms, frustrated. This is pointless. My dad's lawyer will take care of it anyway. I turned my gaze to him sharply. Your father isn't on trial here. You are. And this courtroom isn't a marketplace where justice is for sale. For a long moment, no one spoke. The boy looked down, then up again, searching for his mother's reassurance. But she didn't meet his eyes this time. She was staring straight ahead, her expression finally stripped of pretense. You see, I continued quietly, a justice doesn't care about your name, your wealth, or your father's influence. It cares about your actions. And every action carries a cost. He shifted in his seat, the first real sign of unease crossing his face. The bravado was slipping, even if just slightly. I could sense the courtroom leaning in, not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper. There's a strange collective hope that fills the air when arrogance begins to crack. It's the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone might change before it's too late. Tell me, my voice steady, but low, when you look at your reflection. What do you see? A man who earns respect? Or a boy hiding behind his father's wallet? His jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists. For the first time, he didn't have a response. The silence said everything. I nodded slightly. We'll continue. But understand this. You cannot buy your way through every storm. Some storms you have to weather. And this is one of them. As the bailiff called for the next record to be entered, I looked around the courtroom. Every face told the same story. Disappointment mixed with quiet admiration that for once, truth had spoken louder than wealth. The session wasn't over, far from it. But for the first time that day, the young man's smirk had faded. And in its place, a shadow of doubt had finally begun to form, the smallest crack through which humility might one day enter. The next phase of the hearing felt heavier, quieter, somehow, even though every seat in the courtroom was filled. The young man, who had swaggered into my courtroom earlier with arrogance and entitlement, was now shifting uncomfortably in his chair. The smirk was still there, but it had lost its confidence. His mother sat behind him, staring straight ahead, her face pale. She'd stopped defending him. That told me everything, and I took a slow breath before speaking. Mr. Reynolds, I said, my tone firm but calm. This courtroom doesn't exist to embarrass anyone. It exists to confront truth. And the truth, as I see it, is that you've made a series of decisions that reflect not just disregard for the law, but a lack of understanding of consequence. He looked at me defiant again. With all due respect, Your Honor, you're making it sound like I'm a criminal? These are just traffic tickets. I nodded slightly. You're right. On paper, they're tickets. But every ticket is a moment, a choice you made to prioritize your ego over safety. The problem isn't just that you broke a rule. It's that you don't seem to think the rule applies to you. He rolled his eyes. Everyone speeds, you just catch the unlucky ones. That line. I'd heard it too many times before. And every single time it came from someone who'd never had to witness the cost of reckless behavior. So I asked him, have you ever been to a hospital after a crash? Have you ever seen a parent identifying their child in a morgue because someone thought everyone speeds? His bravado faltered for a moment. His lips pressed together tightly, but he didn't answer. I continued, keeping my voice even. I have, many times, and I can tell you, those moments don't feel unlucky. They feel devastating and avoidable. He shifted in his seat again. The silence between us stretched thick and uncomfortable. I could feel the room watching closely. No one moved, no one whispered. Everyone wanted to see how this boy, who had lived his life shielded by privilege, would respond when the truth finally met him head-on. After a moment, I turned toward the bailiff. Could you bring me his driving record, please? The bailiff handed me the file. A thick one. I flipped through it slowly, page by page, letting the weight of the paper itself tell part of the story. Mr. Reynolds, I said, this is not your first appearance before the court. You've been cited for speeding 5 times in the past year, twice for reckless driving, and once for failure to appear. That's not an accident. That's a pattern. He frowned, his tone defensive. I was late for work a few times. That's all. It's not like I hurt anyone. That's exactly the mindset I'm talking about, I replied. You believe that as long as no one gets hurt, your actions don't matter. But what about the people you endangered? What about the example you set for others on the road? Responsibility isn't measured only by the damage you cause. It's also measured by the risks you choose to take. His mother finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. Your Honor, he's young. He's just impulsive. We've all made mistakes at his age. I turned to her gently. You're right, ma'am. We all make mistakes, but what defines us is whether we learn from them or keep repeating them. I look back at a son. Mr. Reynolds, every record in this file tells me one thing. You haven't learned yet. He exhaled loudly, frustrated. So what do you want me to say? That I'm sorry. Fine. I'm sorry there. Happy? The words were hollow, mechanical, an apology without substance. I'd been on the bench long enough to recognize the difference between remorse and performance. No, I said quietly. I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for understanding. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? I continued. That until you understand the impact of your actions, your words are meaningless. You think your wealth protects you. You think your father's influence insulates you from consequence. But in this courtroom, that insulation doesn't exist. Every person here is equal before the law, whether they walk here or arrive in a limousine. A murmur rippled through the audience, faint, but unmistakable. The statement resonated especially with those who had lived their entire lives being reminded of how unfair the world could be. The young man, however, didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the floor now. His confidence was unraveling, thread by thread. Let me tell you a story, I said after a pause. Years ago, I had another young man in this very courtroom. He was about your age, maybe a little younger. Same attitude, same sense of entitlement. He thought the rules didn't apply to him either. Until one night, driving home from a party, he took a curve too fast. He survived. His best friend didn't. The boy's head lifted slightly, his eyes searching mine. I sentenced him that day, I continued, but it wasn't the punishment that changed him. It was the memory, the guilt. He came back to see me years later, sober, working with a youth program, trying to stop others from making the same mistake. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, Judge, I thought I was invincible until I learned that my actions could destroy someone else's life. The young man shifted again, but this time there was no defiance in his posture, only discomfort. His mother had tears in her eyes now, realizing, perhaps for the first time, how fragile that illusion of privilege really was. I let the story settle before speaking again. Mr. Reynolds, you have a choice to make today. You can continue down this path, dismissive, arrogant, convinced the world owes you leniency. Or you can decide to grow up, because one day your luck will run out. And when it does, I don't want to see you back here under worse circumstances. He swallowed hard but said nothing. The silence was the most honest thing he'd offered all day. After a long pause, I added, You think I'm being hard on you. But I promise you, this is mercy, because what life will do if you don't change will be much harsher. He nodded faintly. It wasn't surrender yet, but it was the first step toward reflection. Good, I said finally. We'll move on to the final part of your hearing. And I hope for your sake you start listening. Not to me, but to the voice inside you that knows when you've gone too far. The gavel rested beside my hand, but I didn't strike it. I didn't need to. She offered because you lied to her. You manipulated her trust. That's not a mistake, young man. That's a betrayal. His mouth opened as if to argue, but I didn't let him. Do you understand what you've done? You've taken advantage of the one person who probably loved you without condition. You've turned her generosity into your shield. The boy looked away. His hands trembled now, just barely. I turned back to the grandmother. Madame, do you have any understanding of how much money has been taken from your account for this vehicle? Her eyes darted downward. No, Your Honor. I just kept paying what he told me. I didn't want to cause trouble. I asked the clerk to read the numbers aloud. Over $32,000 in payments, Your Honor, withdrawn directly from her account. The grandmother covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. Oh, my lord, she whispered. That much, the gallery erupted. Whispers, gasps, shaking heads. The bailiff had to call for silence again. The boy's mother stood, her voice breaking. Hey, Judge, please, she's just a child. He didn't mean... I cut her off gently but firmly. Madam, this is not childish This is premeditated deceit. Your son didn't steal from a stranger. He exploited his grandmother's love. That is one of the deepest forms of betrayal imaginable. She sank back down, sobbing quietly. The grandmother lifted her head slowly, her voice small, but filled with heartbreak. I never thought he could do something like this. He was my little boy. I made him pancakes every morning before school. I gave him my savings for his first car. I thought I was helping him build a better future. You could hear sniffles in the gallery. The humanity of her pain silenced everyone. I looked at her, and I felt something shift inside me, a mix of sorrow and resolve. Autumn, I said softly, you don't deserve this burden. The law will protect you now. This court will make sure. Then I turned my gaze on the boy, not as a judge, but as a man who had seen too many young people destroy themselves with arrogance. You wanted power without work, respect without responsibility. And now you see what that hunger has cost. It didn't just hurt strangers. It wounded your own blood. He said nothing. The silence between us was deafening. After a long pause, I spoke again. This time lower, steadier. This isn't about traffic violations anymore. This is about integrity. Something money can't buy and privilege can't excuse. If you ever hope to reclaim even a shred of what you've lost today, it will begin with one thing, truth. The grandmother wept softly, whispering, I just wanted him to tell the truth. And for the first time since he'd entered the courtroom, the boy lowered his head, not in defiance, but in shame. The first crack had finally appeared in his armor. I looked across the room at the faces of strangers united by shared disbelief, and I thought to myself, this wasn't just a hearing. It was a reckoning. Not only for the boy, but for everyone who had ever believed that love could not be betrayed. The gavel struck softly, signaling recess. But the echo that followed wasn't just the sound of wood against wood. It was the sound of truth landing where it had been denied for far too long. When the courtroom reconvened after recess, there was a stillness that I will never forget. The gallery had filled again. No one wanted to leave. Even those who had only come from minor hearings earlier in the day had stayed, whispering to one another about what had just unfolded. The story of the grandmother's courage had already spread like a quiet fire through the courthouse halls. The boy, the same one who had strutted in my courtroom with his head held high, now sat slumped, his shoulders curved inward, his confidence drained. His mother was beside him, pale and shaking. And just a few feet away, his grandmother sat with her cane across her lap, her face worn but resolute. There was pain in her eyes, yes, but also strength, the kind that comes only from decades of living honestly. I took my seat at the bench. The weight of what I had to say pressed on me like a physical thing. In my years as a judge, I had presided over countless cases of arrogance, recklessness, and deception. But this had become something else entirely. What had begun as a routine traffic case had turned into a revelation about family greed and betrayal. I cleared my throat and began. This court is now in session. The sound echoed sharply, commanding silence. Mr. Reynolds, I said, my tone calm but unyielding, what has come to light here today goes far beyond unpaid tickets or careless driving. What we've uncovered is a pattern of deceit, one that has hurt not just strangers, but your own grandmother, a woman who trusted you with everything she had. The young man didn't look up. His hands were clasped tightly together on the table. His phone, the object that had seemed an extension of his hand earlier, now lay untouched. Your behavior, I continued, shows not just disregard for the law, but a deliberate manipulation of someone who loved you unconditionally. You took her kindness, and use it as cover for your own selfishness. You lied, you forged, and you took advantage of a woman who believed in you. The boy's mother began to sob quietly. His lawyer leaned forward, whispering something in his ear, but the young man didn't move. I looked toward the grandmother. Madame, I said gently, you have shown extraordinary courage today. You did not come here to seek vengeance, only truth. That speaks volumes about your strength and character. She nodded faintly, tears in her eyes. I never wanted him punished, she whispered. I just wanted him to see what he was doing. I nodded. And that is precisely why this moment matters. Because justice at its heart is not about punishment. It's about awakening. It's about holding up a mirror to one's own choices and forcing the truth to be seen. I turned back to the young man. Look at her, I said softly. Look at the person who raised you, who trusted you. She is the one who should be proud of you. Not the friends who cheered you on when you boasted about speeding, not the people who laughed at your posts online. This woman right here is the one whose opinion should have mattered. He looked up slowly, his eyes meeting his grandmother's. For a fleeting moment, the arrogance disappeared. His lips parted slightly as though he might speak, but no words came. I took a deep breath, then continued. Ye have reviewed every document, every record, and every statement in this case. The facts are not only clear, they are damning. The vehicle in question was purchased and registered under your grandmother's name without her understanding. Payments were drawn directly from her account. False information was submitted to the insurance company, and all of it was done to conceal your actions. That is not ignorance. That is intentional deception. The gallery was silent now, every eye fixed on the... You could feel the tension vibrating in the air, thick with the weight of what was about to come. I set the file down and folded my hands. Therefore, I said slowly, this court will order the immediate seizure of the vehicle. It will no longer serve as a symbol of vanity purchased through deceit. Furthermore, the matter of financial exploitation and fraud will be referred to the district attorney for formal review. The boy's head snapped up. Wait, what? We can't do that. My father, the gavel came down once hard. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Enough, I said sharply. Well, in this courtroom, your father's money, his influence, his reputation, none of it matters. The law stands above privilege, and you, young man, are not immune to it. He fell silent. His mouth moved, but no sound came. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. I turned to the grandmother again, softening my tone. Madam, the court will ensure that every fraudulent charge is investigated. Your accounts will be protected. Your credit and financial record will be restored. You will not bear the consequences of what was done in your name. She pressed her hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly. Thank you, Your Honor. I nodded once. You don't owe me thanks, I said. You owe yourself peace. Then I turned back to the boy one last time. My voice was calm, but firm enough to fill the room. Miss Reynolds, you walked into this courtroom believing you were untouchable. You believed that money could shield you from accountability. But today, you learned a lesson that many never do until it's too late. That justice cannot be bought, and love cannot be exploited without consequence. He swallowed hard, eyes wet now. I didn't mean to. I raised a hand. Intent means nothing when your actions speak louder. You had every opportunity to choose differently, but you didn't. So today, the law will choose for you. I forgive you, she whispered, but I can't forget. Her words hit the courtroom like a wave. Some spectators began to cry softly. Others nodded, recognizing the strength it took for a woman so betrayed to still offer forgiveness. I sat back, the weight of the gavel in my hand once more. This hearing began as a simple case of reckless driving, I said quietly. It ends as a lesson, one about family, integrity, and consequence. I hope you carry it with you for the rest of your life. Then, slowly and deliberately, I brought the gavel down. The sound rang out through the chamber, final, echoing, absolute. The grandmother stood leaning on her cane. As she passed her grandson, she stopped for just a moment. Her hand trembled, reaching out as if to touch his shoulder, but she hesitated. Instead, she whispered softly, You have to live with this now? He didn't respond? He couldn't? The gallery stood as she walked out, parting silently to let her pass. People reached out to steady her, to thank her, to simply offer a nod of respect. And as the door closed behind her, I looked at the young man one last time. He sat there, alone now, the noise of his own actions finally catching up to him. Justice had been served. But more than that, a truth had been spoken, one that would echo far beyond that courtroom. No amount of privilege can protect you from the weight of your own choices.